Dr. Lisa Martinez pressed her face against the observation window of the U-East Meridian as the alien world grew larger before them. The planet looked like something from a dream, with its purple forests and silver rivers that sparkled in the light of twin suns. After 6 months of traveling through space, she could hardly believe they had finally reached Kepler-442c. Captain Jake Morrison walked up behind her, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, looking out at the world below. "Hard to believe there's intelligent life down there." Lisa nodded and smiled. She had spent the last 3 years studying the radio signals that came from this planet. The messages seemed peaceful and simple. The aliens called themselves Etherians, and from what the humans could understand, they lived quiet lives in harmony with their forest world. "Are you ready for this, Doc?" Captain Morrison asked. "First contact with a new species is a big deal. I've been ready my whole life," Lisa replied. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl reading books about space exploration. Now she was leading humanity's first peaceful contact mission with an alien race. The ship's communication officer, Amy Thompson, called out from her station. "Captain, we're getting another transmission from the planet's surface. They're welcoming us to land at the coordinates they sent earlier." Captain Morrison nodded. "Good. Ryan, what's the security situation look like?" Security Chief Ryan Carter looked up from his screens. "All quiet, sir. No weapon signatures, no military installations that we can detect. These Zephyrians seem as peaceful as their messages suggest." Chief Engineer Bobby Lewis joined the group at the observation window. "The landing shuttles are ready to go, Captain. We can have the first team on the ground within the hour." Lisa felt her heart beating faster with excitement. She looked around at her team of 12 scientists and researchers. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing they might be gone from Earth for years. Young Ensign Katie Bell, fresh out of the academy, stood nearby checking her equipment. For the 10th time that morning. "Nervous?" Lisa asked the young woman. Katie smiled. "A little. But this is what I trained for. I can't believe I get to be part of humanity's first peaceful contact with aliens." The landing went smoothly. The Zephyrians had cleared a large area in their forest for the human shuttles to land. As Lisa stepped off the shuttle onto alien soil, for the first time, she felt like she was walking into history. The Zephyrians looked almost exactly like their transmitted images had suggested. They stood about 6 feet tall with thin, graceful bodies covered in what looked like soft green fur. Their large eyes were gentle and kind, and they moved with slow, careful steps that reminded Lisa of deer back on Earth. The leader of the Zephyrian group stepped forward. Through their translation devices, he introduced himself as Vextar. "Welcome, humans from the Star Soul," he said in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "We are honored by your visit to our world." Lisa felt tears in her eyes. This was everything she had hoped first contact would be. Peaceful, respectful, and full of wonder. The first week on the planet was like a dream. The Zephyrians showed the humans their beautiful cities that grew from living trees. They shared their art, which consisted of songs that could make flowers bloom and dances that called birds from the sky. Lisa and her team learned about Zephyrian culture, their peaceful ways, and their deep connection to their forest world. Captain Morrison kept in regular contact with the landing team from orbit. "Everything still going well down there, Doc?" he asked during one of their daily check-ins. "Better than well," Lisa replied. "Jake, these people are amazing. They've never known war. They've never even had arguments that lasted more than a day. They've achieved something humans have been trying to do for thousands of years." Ensign Bell was especially fascinated by the younger Zephyrians. She spent hours learning their language and playing their simple games. "They're like children," she told Lisa one evening as they sat around their camp. "Innocent and pure. I wish everyone on Earth could meet them." Amy Thompson was working with the Zephyrian communication specialists to set up a direct link between Earth and Kepler 442c. They want to talk to our leaders, she explained. They say they have much to share with humanity. Everything changed. On the 8th day, the Zephyrians had invited the humans to attend what they called a harmony ceremony in their main city. Lisa and her entire team were honored guests, sitting in a circle with hundreds of Zephyrians in a clearing surrounded by massive trees, stood in the center of the circle and began to speak. But something was different about his voice. It sounded harder, colder than before. "Humans of Earth," he said, "you have come far to visit us. You bring gifts and speak of friendship. You are exactly what we hoped you would be." Lisa felt something wrong in the way he said those words, but she couldn't figure out what it was. "For many cycles we have watched you through your transmissions," Vextar continued. "We have studied your species, learned your weaknesses, and prepared for this day." The hair on the back of Lisa's neck stood up. Around the circle she noticed. The Zephyrians were no longer sitting peacefully. They were standing, and something about their posture had changed completely. "You see, humans, we have not been entirely honest with you," Vextar said. And now his voice carried a sound like breaking glass. "We are not the peaceful plant eaters you believe us to be. We are hunters, and you are prey." Suddenly, the forest around them erupted with movement. Hundreds of Zephyrian warriors emerged from hiding places in the trees and bushes. These were not the gentle, deer-like creatures Lisa had come to know. These Zephyrians were larger, with sharp teeth and claws, and their eyes burned with predatory. "Intelligence, run!" Lisa shouted to her team, but it was too late. The Zephyrian warriors moved with deadly speed. Within seconds, they had surrounded the humans. Lisa watched in horror as Katie Bell was grabbed by two warriors and dragged toward the trees. The young woman's scream cut through the air like a knife. "Please!" Lisa begged Vextar as more of her team members were captured. "We came in peace. We trusted you." Vextar laughed, a sound that made Lisa's blood run cold. "That is what makes you such perfect prey, Dr. Martinez. Your species is weak because you choose to trust. You choose to believe in goodness. It makes you easy to hunt." 12 members of Lisa's team were captured, including Katie and several other young researchers. Lisa herself was grabbed by two warriors and felt their claws dig into her arms. "What do you want from us?" she demanded. "Entertainment," Vextar replied simply. "Your species will provide us with months of interesting experiments. The younger ones will be saved for our great feast. We have been eating intelligent species for thousands of years, but we have never tasted human flesh." High above them, Captain Morrison's voice crackled through Lisa's communicator, which had fallen too. "The ground. Landing team, report. We're reading massive movement on the surface." One of the Zephyrian warriors picked up the communicator and spoke into it. "Captain Morrison of the human vessel, your people are now our prisoners. They will die slowly and painfully while we broadcast their suffering across our world for all to see. Your species is weak and pathetic, suitable only for our amusement and our dinner tables." Lisa heard Jake's voice, tight with anger and fear. "Let them go, we can negotiate." "There is nothing to negotiate," the warrior replied. "Your people crossed into our territory. Now they belong to us. Leave our space, human, or we will hunt down your ship as well." As Lisa was dragged away toward the Zephyrian city, she could hear the sound of the human shuttles taking off in the distance. She knew Jake had no choice but to retreat and call for help. But she also knew that help might come too late for her. And her team, the last thing she heard before being taken into the dark tunnels beneath the Zephyrian city was Katie Bell crying for her mother. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were hunting prey, but they had just declared war on humanity itself. They had crossed a line that no species had ever been allowed to cross and survive. They had taken human prisoners for torture and consumption. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U-East Meridian, staring at the planet below where his people were being held prisoner. His hands shook with rage as he watched the alien transmission that had just come through on all frequencies. The Zephyrians were broadcasting live video of Dr. Lisa Martinez strapped to some kind of metal table while alien scientists poked and prodded her with strange instruments. Her screams echoed through the bridge speakers before Communications Officer Amy Thompson quickly turned down the volume. "Captain," Amy said, her voice breaking, "they're sending this signal across their entire planet. They're treating it like entertainment." Jake's jaw tightened. In the background of the transmission, he could see other members of his crew in cages, including young Katie Bell, who was curled up in a corner, crying. The Zephyrians had stripped away all pretense of being peaceful. They laughed and pointed at the human prisoners like they were animals in a zoo. "How long until we reach the quantum relay station?" Jake asked his navigator. 18 hours, sir," came the reply. "We're pushing the engines as hard as we can," Jake nodded. Every minute they delayed meant more suffering for his people, but he had to get word back to Earth. Humanity needed to know what had happened here. More importantly, they needed to know what the Zephyrians really were. The 18-hour journey felt like 18 years. When they finally reached the relay station, Jake immediately sent an emergency transmission to Earth Command. The message was simple and devastating. First contact failed. 12 crew members captured by hostile aliens, requesting immediate military assistance. 3 days later, Jake stood in the main briefing room, Earth Command headquarters. The room was filled with the most powerful people in human space. President Alana Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, her face pale after watching the recordings Jake had brought back. Admiral Jack Phillips, head of the Earth Defense Force, slammed his hand on the table. "This is an act of war," he declared. "They've taken our people for torture and consumption. We cannot let this stand." Secretary of State Helen Davis shook her head. "We need to try diplomacy first. Maybe we can negotiate for their release." "Negotiate?" Colonel Danny Brooks of Special Operations stood up, his face red with anger. "Did you see what they're doing to our people? They're cutting pieces off Dr. Martinez while she's still awake." President Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. "I've seen the footage. We all have, but we need to be smart about this. Earth has never fought a war against an alien species before." Jake stepped forward. "With respect, Madam President, they've made it clear they see us as nothing more than food. During my time observing their planet, I recorded over 40 different species being held in their facilities. They're not just predators, they're collectors. They hunt intelligent life for sport and food." Admiral Phillips activated a holographic display showing the Zephyrian system. "Our long-range sensors confirm Captain Morrison's report. The Zephyrians have facilities on 12 different worlds, all filled with prisoners from various species. This isn't just about our people anymore. It's about stopping a galactic-scale hunting operation." Dr. Richard Stone, head of Advanced Weapons Research, had been quiet throughout the meeting. Now he spoke up. "If we're going to do this, we need to be prepared for total war. My department has been working on theoretical weapons that we never thought we'd need to build." "What kind of weapons?" President Rodriguez asked. "Planet crackers, stellar manipulation devices, ships that can destroy entire solar systems, Doctor." Stone replied quietly. "We called them theoretical because we hoped we'd never have to use them." The room fell silent. The weight of what they were discussing settled on everyone present. Secretary Davis tried one more time. "Perhaps if we contact them again, show them we're prepared to fight, they might release our people." As if summoned by her words, Amy Thompson's voice came through the room's communication system. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're receiving another transmission from the Zephyrian planet." "Put it through," President Rodriguez ordered. The holographic display changed to show a live feed from the alien world. Vexstar, the Zephyrian leader, stood in what looked like an arena filled with cheering aliens. In the center of the arena, Katie Bell was chained to a post, barely conscious. "Humans of Earth," Vexstar spoke directly to the camera. "Your diplomat messages amuse us. You offer to trade, to negotiate, to give us things we already have. But you misunderstand your position. You are not our equals. You are our prey." Jake felt his blood turn to ice as he watched Katie lift her head weakly. The young woman who had been so excited about first contact now looked broken and terrified. "To demonstrate how little we think of your species," Vexstar continued, "we will now show you what happens to prey that no longer entertains us." A Zephyrian warrior stepped forward with a long curved knife. "No," Jake shouted, but it was too late. The transmission continued for another 10 minutes as the Zephyrians celebrated Katie's death while the crowd cheered. When it finally ended, the briefing room was completely silent except for the sound of someone crying. President Rodriguez stood up slowly. Her face was no longer pale but flushed with a cold, terrible anger. "Admiral Phillips, activate protocol." 7. Admiral Phillips looked shocked. "Madam President, Protocol 7 is total war authorization. That removes all limits on weapons development and military action." "I know what it is," President Rodriguez replied. "Activate it, now." Colonel Brooks stepped forward. "What are your orders, Madam President?" "Find them, hunt them. Make sure they understand that they picked the wrong species to prey upon," she said quietly. "Dr. Stone, you have unlimited resources. Build whatever you need." "Admiral Phillips, I want every available ship prepared for combat. We're not just going to rescue our people. We're going to make sure the Zephyrians never hurt anyone again." Dr. Stone nodded. "The Omega-class warships can be ready in 6 months. The planet crackers will take longer, but we can have the stellar manipulation devices ready in 4 months. "Too long," Jake said. "Every day we wait, more people die. Let me take a small team back to gather intelligence. If we're going to win this war, we need to know everything about their defenses." Admiral Phillips considered this. "It's dangerous. If they capture you, they'll do worse than kill you." "They already have my people," Jake replied. "I'm not leaving them there to suffer while we build weapons." President Rodriguez looked at Jake for a long moment. "Very well, take the East Shadow. It's our best stealth ship. But your mission is intelligence only. Do not engage the enemy unless you have no choice." 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge of the East Shadow with his new crew. Lieutenant Commander Paul Kim was his second in command, a brilliant tactical officer who had volunteered for the mission. Sergeant Major Susan Wright led the small Marine unit aboard, while tech specialist Chris Murphy handled the advanced scanning equipment. "Course laid in for the Zephyrian system," Paul reported. "We should arrive in 2 weeks," Jake nodded. Behind them, the largest military buildup in human history was beginning. Shipyards that had been building peaceful exploration vessels were now retooling to build weapons of war. The civilian population was being prepared for the possibility that Earth itself might come under attack, but Jake's mind was focused on the 11 people still alive on that alien world. Lisa Martinez was still being tortured in their experiments. 10 other crew members were waiting their turn to be killed for entertainment. He had to find them, had to learn everything he could about Zephyrian defenses so that when the human fleet arrived, they would be ready. As the shadow jumped into hyperspace, Jake made a silent promise to his captured crew. Humanity was coming, and they would bring with them a fury that the Zephyrians could never have imagined. The galaxy was about to learn that there were some lines you never crossed when dealing with humans. The Zephyrians had crossed that line. And now they would face the consequences. The storm was gathering, and soon it would break across the stars with the full force of human rage. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the darkness of space, watching through the shadow sensors as the largest human fleet in history prepared to jump into Zephyrian territory. 500 warships hung in formation around the massive dreadnought. UES Retribution, their weapons powered and ready for battle. Shadow Actual. This is Admiral Phillips aboard Retribution, came the voice through the communication system. What's your status on the intelligence gathering? Jake looked at the data his team had collected over the past 2 weeks of sneaking around Zephyrian space. The news was worse than anyone had expected. Admiral, the Zephyrians are not alone, Jake reported. They've formed an alliance with 2 other species. The Vraki are insect-like creatures that fight in swarms. The Netheri are energy beings that can pass through most of our defenses. Together, they have over 2,000 ships. Lieutenant Commander Paul Kim pulled up the tactical display. Sir, we've also confirmed the location of our people. They're being held on a fortress world called Zarkith, deep in Zephyrian territory. Only 11 are still alive. Jake's heart sank. They had lost another person during the 2 weeks of intelligence gathering. Status of the survivors? Tech specialist Chris Murphy looked grim. Dr. Martinez is barely alive. The experiments have been extensive. 3 others are in similar condition. The rest are being saved for what the Zephyrians call the Grand Feast. They plan to broadcast their consumption across the galaxy to show other species what happens when they resist. Admiral Phillips was quiet for a moment. Understood, Shadow. Take position behind our lines. We're beginning the assault. Jake watched as the human fleet jumped into hyperspace. The Shadow followed a few minutes later, emerging at the edge of the Telos system, where the first battle would take place. What they found waiting for them was a nightmare. The Zephyrian Alliance fleet was massive beyond imagination. Sleek Zephyrian ships with organic curves, mixed with angular Vraki vessels that looked like flying insects. The Netheri ships were barely visible, appearing as distortions in space that hurt to look at directly. All ships, this is Admiral Phillips, came the broadcast to the entire human fleet. Remember what they did to our people. Remember Katie Bell. Remember why we're here. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you prey on humanity. The battle began with a coordinated Zephyrian attack. Thousands of Vraki fighters swarmed toward the human fleet like angry wasps. The Netheri ships phased through the human battle line, their energy weapons cutting through ship hulls like paper. But the humans were ready. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the UES Retribution, ordered the deployment of the new plasma barrier system. A wall of superheated energy appeared between the human fleet and the Vraki swarm, turning hundreds of enemy fighters into glowing debris. Captain Steve Johnson on the UES Vengeance executed a brilliant flanking maneuver, leading a squadron of fast cruisers around the enemy formation. His ships opened fire with the new quantum torpedoes, each one capable of destroying a ship 10 times larger than itself. Captain Lavra White aboard the experimental UES Nemesis deployed the most terrifying weapon yet. Gravity bombs that created artificial black holes in the middle of enemy formations. Entire squadrons of Zephyrian ships were crushed into tiny points of light before disappearing completely. The enemy fleet, which had expected to face weak human prey, found themselves fighting the most advanced and deadly military force in the galaxy. But the humans were just getting started. All ships, prepare for biological warfare deployment. Admiral Phillips ordered. Dr. Richard Stone had spent months developing the perfect weapon. Targeted viruses that would affect only the 3 enemy species, spreading through their ship's life support systems. The weapons were deployed in tiny capsules that looked harmless floating through space. Within minutes, the effect was devastating. Zephyrian ships began losing power as their crews fell ill. Vraki vessels crashed into each other as their pilots lost control. The Netheri, being energy beings, were immune to the virus but found themselves alone against the full human fleet, Zephyrian. Fleet Commander Kefver tried to rally his forces, but it was too late. The human fleet had turned the tide of battle in less than an hour. This is impossible. Kefver broadcast on all frequencies. You are prey animals. You cannot defeat us. Captain Santos replied from the Retribution. We were never prey. You just made the mistake of thinking civilized meant weak. The real terror began when the humans deployed their stellar manipulation devices. 3 massive ships that Jake had never seen before moved into position around the Zephyrian home system star. They were ugly, industrial-looking vessels covered in complex machinery. What are those? Paul Kim asked from the Shadows bridge. Jake checked the classified files Admiral Phillips had shared with him. Stellar engineering ships. They're going to force the Zephyrian sun to expand. You mean make it go supernova? Eventually. But not right away. They're going to make it slowly grow larger and hotter, making the planets in the system uninhabitable. One by one. It's psychological warfare. The Zephyrians will have to watch their homeworld die slowly. The battle in space continued for 6 more hours. Human ships used weapons that seemed to come from science fiction. Captain Johnson's squadron deployed temporal disruptors that aged enemy ships into scrap metal. Captain White's nemesis used dimensional rifts to cut hostile vessels in half. But the most shocking moment came when the Zephyrians tried to use their cruelest tactic. They brought up prison ships filled with captured beings from dozens of species, including the remaining humans, and positioned them as shields around their command vessels. Human fleet, cease fire or we will execute all prisoners. Kefver broadcast out. The human fleet stopped shooting for exactly 10 seconds. Then Admiral Phillips' voice came over all channels, cold and emotionless. You have already proven you will. Kill prisoners regardless of our actions. We will not be manipulated by monsters. The human fleet resumed firing, but now they used precision weapons. Teleportation devices beamed boarding parties directly onto the prison ships. Marine units led by Sergeant Major Susan Wright fought their way through enemy vessels to reach the captives. Jake watched in amazement as the rescue operation unfolded. Human soldiers, outnumbered 10 to 1, cut through Zephyrian defenders with weapons that seemed to anticipate their enemies' moves. Power armor that could withstand anything the aliens threw at them. Energy shields that deflected the enemy's strongest attacks. Shadow, we need you to move in and assist with prisoner extraction, Admiral Phillips ordered. Jake didn't hesitate. Take us in, Paul. Full stealth until we're at the prison ship. The Shadow slipped through the battle, invisible to enemy sensors. Jake led a boarding party onto the Zephyrian vessel holding the surviving humans. What they found made his blood run cold. Dr. Lisa Martinez was barely recognizable. Months of experiments had left her scarred and broken, but her eyes still held intelligence and determination. She was conscious enough to help identify where the other prisoners were being held. Jake, she whispered when she saw him. They're going to kill everyone in the system. They're planning something called the Final Hunt. They want to capture and eat representatives from every species in the galaxy. Not anymore, Jake replied, helping her to the rescue shuttle. We're here to end this. As the Shadow evacuated the prisoners, Jake looked back at the battle raging in space. The Zephyrian fleet was in full retreat, but the humans were not letting them escape. Hunter-killer squadrons chased down every enemy ship while the stellar manipulation continued. The Zephyrian home system star was beginning to swell visibly. Soon, the inner planets would be uninhabitable. The species that had hunted and consumed intelligent life for thousands of years was about to learn what it felt like to be hunted. The message was clear to every species watching the battle. Humanity had revealed itself as the galaxy's apex predator, and they would show no mercy to those who preyed on the innocent. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the medical bay of the UE Shadow, watching the ship's doctor work on Dr. Lisa Martinez. The woman who had led humanity's first peaceful contact mission was barely alive. Scars covered her arms and face where the Zephyrians had cut into her for their experiments. "Will she live?" Jake asked quietly. The doctor looked up with tired eyes. "Physically, yes, but the psychological damage. Jake, they did things to her that no being should ever experience. They filmed it all and broadcast it as entertainment across their planet." Lisa's eyes opened weakly. When she saw Jake, she tried to sit up. "The facility," she whispered. "On Zarketh. You have to see what's really there. We got you out, Lisa. You're safe now." "No, you don't understand," she said, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "It's not just humans. There are thousands of them. Thousands of intelligent beings from dozens of species, all being prepared for consumption. Some have been there for years." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "How many species?" "At least 40 that I saw, maybe more." "Jake, the Zephyrians have been doing this for centuries. They're not just hunters. They're farmers. They keep entire populations of sentient beings as livestock." Before Jake could respond, his communicator crackled to life. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Phillips. We need you and your team for a special mission." An hour later, Jake found himself in the briefing room of the UE's Retribution with Admiral Phillips and the other fleet commanders. Captain Maria Santos looked exhausted from the recent battle, while Captain Steve Johnson's uniform still showed burn marks from enemy weapons. Captain Lavra White sat quietly, her experimental ship having performed beyond all expectations. "The situation has changed," Admiral Phillips began. "Our sensors have detected something on the fortress world of Zarketh that requires immediate investigation. We're sending a joint task force to the surface." A holographic display showed the planet below. It looked like a massive prison, with dark structures covering most of the surface. "What are we looking at?" Captain Santos asked. "Hell," Jake replied quietly. "According to Dr. Martinez, it's where they keep their livestock." Admiral Phillips nodded grimly. "Intelligence suggests there may be up to 50,000 sentient beings held captive on that world. Representatives from species across the galaxy." 50,000? Captain Johnson looked shocked. "How is that possible?" "The Zephyrians have been hunting for a very long time," Admiral Phillips explained. "But here's what makes this mission urgent. They're planning to execute all the prisoners rather than let us rescue them. We have maybe 6 hours before they begin the mass killings." Jake stood up. "My team is ready, sir. You'll be working with Marine Colonel Betty Ross and her elite squad. Your mission is to infiltrate the facility, gather intelligence on the full scope of Zephyrian operations, and hold the position until the main rescue force arrives." Colonel Betty Ross was a legend in Marines. She had led successful operations on 12 different worlds and never lost a soldier under her command. When Jake met her in the shuttle bay, he was surprised to find a woman barely 5 feet tall, with steel gray eyes. "Captain Morrison," she said, shaking his hand with a grip like iron. "I've read about your intelligence gathering. Good work. My people are ready to follow your lead on this one." The infiltration of Zarketh was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The planet's surface was covered with massive dome structures connected by underground tunnels. Each dome held hundreds of prisoners from different species. "My God," whispered tech specialist Chris Murphy as they moved through the first facility. Lisa was right. This is a farm. The sight made Jake sick to his stomach. Intelligent beings from across the galaxy were kept in small cells, many showing signs of experiments similar to what had been done to Dr. Martinez. Some had been there so long they no longer seemed to remember their home worlds. "Captain," Sergeant Major Susan Wright called out from deeper in the facility. "You need to see this." Jake followed her voice to a central command room filled with screens and data displays. What he saw there made him understand the true scope of Zephyrian evil. They've been tracking every spacefaring species in the galaxy, Susan explained, pointing to a massive star map. Each species has a file showing their population, technology level, and something called harvest potential. Jake examined the data with growing horror. The Zephyrians had detailed plans for hunting and consuming every intelligent species they had discovered. Humans were listed as high-value prey, with notes about their emotional responses making the meat more flavorful. "Look at this," Chris called from another terminal. "They've been selling captured beings to other predator species. This isn't just about food, it's a business." Colonel Ross coordinated her Marines throughout the facility while Jake's team gathered intelligence. The scope of the operation was staggering. The Zephyrians had turned cruelty into an industry, with facilities dedicated to breeding, experimenting on, and preparing intelligent beings for consumption. "Contact!" One of the Marines called out over the radio. "Zephyrian forces incoming." From the North Tunnel. The battle that followed was unlike anything in military history. Human soldiers armed with the most advanced weapons humanity could build fought against aliens, who had been perfecting the art of hunting for centuries. But the Zephyrians had made a crucial mistake. They had learned to hunt prey that tried to run or hide. They had never faced prey that fought back with organized military precision. Colonel Ross's Marines moved through the facility like a force of nature. Their power armor deflected Zephyrian claws and teeth, while their weapons cut through enemy defenses. When the aliens tried to use prisoners as shields, the humans deployed non-lethal gas that knocked out the captives while killing only the Zephyrians. "Prisoners secured in Section 7, reported one Marine squad leader. "We've got about 200 beings here from at least 15 different species." "Section 12 clear," came another report. "Found their breeding facility." "Sir," they were raising some species specifically for consumption. Jake coordinated the rescue effort while monitoring communications from the fleet above. The space battle had expanded beyond the Zephyrian system as word of humanity's response spread across the galaxy. "Admiral Phillips to ground team," came the transmission. "We're receiving communication requests from multiple species. Everyone wants to know what we're doing down there. Tell them we're cleaning up a mess that should have been dealt with centuries ago." Jake replied. The real shock came when they reached the facility's central laboratory. Dr. Martinez had been right about the experiments, but she hadn't seen the worst of it. The Zephyrians had been using their captives to develop new ways of causing pain and fear, believing it improved the taste of the meat. "Captain, we need to preserve this evidence," Colonel Ross said, her voice tight with anger. "The galaxy needs to see what these monsters have been doing." As they secured the facility, Jake received word that the stellar manipulation was accelerating. The Zephyrian home system star was expanding faster than planned, and the inner planets were already becoming uninhabitable. "Sir," Chris reported, "I'm reading massive evacuations from Zephyrian colonies throughout the sector. They're abandoning their worlds." "Good," Jake replied coldly. "Let them run. We'll hunt down every last one of them." The rescue operation took 18 hours. When it was finished, they had freed over 47,000 beings from dozens of species. Some had been prisoners for decades, others for just weeks. All bore the physical and psychological scars of Zephyrian cruelty. As Jake stood in the empty facility that had once been a place of torture and death, he received a message from Admiral Phillips. "Captain, we're receiving surrender offers from the Vrakai and the Theory. They want to negotiate terms." Jake looked around at the evidence of systematic cruelty that surrounded him. "Tell them they can surrender unconditionally, or they can share the same fate as their Zephyrian allies. Those are the only options." Above them, the Zephyrian sun continued to grow larger and brighter. Soon, it would destroy every world in their home system. But that was just the beginning. Humanity had tasted war against a truly evil enemy, and they had discovered something about themselves. When faced with absolute cruelty, they could respond with absolute force. The galaxy was about to learn that. There were some species you never hunted, never captured, and never underestimated. The Zephyrians had learned this lesson too late. 3 months after the battle at Zarkith, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Memorial, watching as the last group of rescued prisoners prepared to return to their home worlds. The ship was one of humanity's newest designs, built specifically to transport the thousands of beings they had freed from Zephyrian captivity. The Zephyrian civilization no longer existed. Their home star had gone supernova 2 weeks earlier, destroying every planet in their system. In a blast of light that could be seen from neighboring star systems, human hunter-killer squadrons led by commanders like Gary Mitchell and Captain Sandra Lee had tracked down every Zephyrian colony, outpost, and ship throughout the galaxy. There were no Zephyrians left alive. "Admiral," came a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Dr. Lisa Martinez approaching. She walked with a slight limp now, one of the permanent reminders of her time in Zephyrian captivity. But her eyes were clear and determined. "How are our passengers doing?" Jake asked. "Better each day," Lisa replied. She now served as head of the Xenological Protection Agency, a new human organization dedicated to helping species recover from predator attacks. "The Altarians from Sector 7 are almost ready to see their families again." "It's been 4 years since they were captured," Jake nodded. The rescue operations had revealed the true scope of Zephyrian hunting. Some beings had been prisoners for decades, with entire generations born in captivity. The psychological healing would take years. But at least now they had hope. "What's the status on the Vrakai and Netheri surrender?" Jake asked. "Complete," Lisa answered. "Both species have accepted unconditional surrender. They've agreed to disarm their entire military, pay reparations to victim species, and accept permanent human oversight of their governments." The two former allies of the Zephyrians had been shocked by humanity's response. When they saw an entire star system destroyed and a civilization completely erased, they realized they had allied themselves with the wrong side. Their surrender had been swift and total. "Admiral Morrison," a new voice called out. Jake turned to see Ambassador Tony Rodriguez approaching. The man had become humanity's primary representative to the Galactic Council since the war ended. "Tony, how did the council meeting go?" Jake asked. The ambassador's face was troubled. "Mixed reactions. Some species are grateful for what we did. Others are terrified of us. The council has officially thanked humanity for ending the Zephyrian threat. But they're also concerned about our new military capabilities." Jake wasn't surprised. The weapons humanity had used to destroy the Zephyrians were beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Planet crackers that could split worlds in half. Stellar manipulation devices that could make stars explode. Warships that could destroy entire fleets single-handedly. "What kind of concerns?" Lisa asked. "They want to know if we plan to use these weapons against other species." The Altarian Republic's ambassador Chenever admitted that they used to see humans as aggressive newcomers, but now they realize we're something else entirely. Jake walked to the window and looked out at Earth in the distance. The planet was surrounded by the largest military fleet in galactic history. Humanity had learned that the universe was full of predators, and they were determined never to be caught unprepared again. "What did you tell them?" Jake asked. "The truth," Tony replied. "That humanity doesn't want to conquer or control other species. We want to protect the innocent and punish those who prey on them, but I'm not sure they understand the difference." A communication alert sounded throughout the ship. "Admiral Morrison, please report to the bridge," came the announcement. On the bridge, Jake found Captain Paul Keem monitoring multiple communication channels. Since the end of the war, Paul had been promoted to captain of the memorial and was doing excellent work helping coordinate the rescue efforts. "What's the situation, Paul?" Jake asked. "We're receiving distress calls from the Kepler 438 system," Paul reported. A species called the Drakmari are attacking civilian populations there. Early reports suggest they're following the same pattern as the Zephyrians, capturing intelligent beings for consumption. Jake felt his blood run cold. How many ships do they have? Intelligence estimates about 300 vessels. They're not as advanced as the Zephyrians, but they're using similar tactics. Recommendations? Captain Paul Kim pulled up a tactical display. The Fifth Fleet under Admiral Phillips is 3 days away. We could have them intercept the Drakmari before they escape with their prisoners. Jake shook his head. 3 days is too long. How many ships do we have in the immediate area? 12 vessels, including 3 destroyers and the experimental cruiser U.S. Justice under Captain Sandra Lee. Send them in, Jake ordered. Tell Captain Lee she has full authorization to use whatever force is necessary. As the human ships moved toward the Kepler 438 system, Jake reflected on how much had changed since the first contact mission that had started this war. Humanity had revealed itself as the galaxy's ultimate protector, but that protection came with a price. 2 days later, reports came back from the battle. Captain Sandra Lee had engaged the Drakmari fleet and destroyed it completely in less than 6 hours. The human ships had used their advanced weapons to cut through the enemy fleet like a knife through paper. Over 2,000 prisoners from various species had been rescued, but the most important part of the report was what happened when the Drakmari leader tried to surrender. "This is Captain Lee," came the recorded transmission. "Drakmari Commander, you have 2 choices. Release all prisoners immediately and surrender unconditionally, or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to decide." The Drakmari leader had laughed and replied, "You humans are weak. We will eat your people as we have eaten countless others." Captain Lee's response was cold and final. Wrong answer. The Drakmari fleet was annihilated. Not a single enemy ship escaped. Word of the battle spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Within a week, 3 other predator species that had been planning similar attacks quietly disbanded their fleets and released their prisoners. The message was clear: humanity would not tolerate the hunting of intelligent life anywhere in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Martinez joined Jake on the observation deck as they watched the last shuttle depart for the Centauri system, carrying a family of Rigelians back to their home world after 2 years in captivity. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Lisa asked quietly. "Destroying entire civilizations, I mean." Jake considered the question. It was one that kept him awake at night. The Zephyrians had been hunting and eating intelligent beings for centuries. They would never have stopped. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to become something the guilty fear. "But what does that make us?" "What we need to be," Jake replied. "The galaxy is full of species that see others as prey. Someone has to be the apex predator that keeps them in check." A communication came through from Earth Command. President Elena Rodriguez appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. "Admiral Morrison, I wanted to personally thank you for your service during this crisis. The Xenological Protection Agency reports that predator attacks throughout the galaxy have dropped by 90% since our response to the Zephyrian threat." "Thank you, Madam President," Jake replied. "What are our next orders?" "Continue the rescue operations. Help the survivors heal and return to their families, and maintain our fleets at full readiness. The galaxy is safer now, but there are still threats out there." After the communication ended, Jake and Lisa stood in comfortable silence, watching Earth turn slowly in space. The planet was now protected by weapons that could destroy solar systems and defended by soldiers who had proven they would go to any length to protect the innocent. "What do you think happens next?" Lisa asked. "We become what the galaxy needs." "US to be," Jake replied. "Protectors for those who can't protect themselves. A warning to those who would prey on the weak. And a reminder that there are some lines you never cross." And if other species fear us? Jake looked out at the stars, where human ships now patrolled the trade routes and protected civilian vessels from pirates and predators. Fear from predators is respect from the innocent, he said quietly. I can live with that. Across the galaxy, a new order was taking shape. Species that followed 3 simple rules found humanity to be generous allies and trading partners. Do not harm human civilians. Do not take prisoners for torture or consumption. Do not mistake human mercy for human weakness. Those who followed these rules prospered. Those who broke them discovered why humans were no longer the galaxy's newcomers, but its ultimate enforcers. The line had been crossed, and humanity's wrath had been unleashed. Now the galaxy was a safer place for all who chose to live in peace.